The dumbest people always win. Here's why. We've all seen it. You're in a room full of brilliant, thoughtful, well-intentioned people, and somehow the least competent, most oblivious, or even the most brazenly foolish person ends up getting the promotion, winning the election, dominating the conversation, or steering the ship. And you sit there wondering how? How does someone who clearly lacks depth, foresight, or even basic awareness consistently rise to power, while others more virtuous, more intelligent, more careful fall to the side? This isn't just a glitch in the system. It's not a fluke. It's a pattern. And it's a pattern Machiavelli understood better than almost anyone else in history. Niccolo Machiavelli didn't believe in the world most of us are taught to believe in, the world where virtue is rewarded, where the best ideas win, where honesty and intelligence naturally rise to the top. He believed in the world as it is, messy, unpredictable, driven by perception more than truth, and most of all, governed by human nature. And human nature, he argued, doesn't care about virtue. It cares about power, and more specifically about the appearance of power. Machiavelli's genius lies in his ruthless clarity. He saw that success in human systems, whether in politics, business, or even social life, is not about who is smartest. It's about who is most effective at appearing confident, unapologetic, and useful to others.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more topics you love.
So why do the dumbest people so often win? Let's unpack that word first. When we say dumb, we don't always mean lacking intelligence. We often mean lacking nuance, lacking hesitation, lacking doubt. And ironically, that's precisely what gives them the edge. Because in a world obsessed with certainty, people who exhibit doubt, even for good, thoughtful reasons, are seen as weak. The person who barrels forward, oversimplifies the problem, offers a bold, even if ridiculous, solution, and speaks as if they know exactly what to do, that person gains attention. They gain momentum. And momentum is magnetic. Machiavelli would say they understand the optics of power, even if they don't understand the substance of it. Now, let's get into the deeper mechanics. Intelligent people tend to see complexity. They weigh outcomes. They consider unintended consequences. They ask questions like, is this ethical? Or will this hurt someone? And while those are noble questions, they slow you down in a fast-moving world. Meanwhile, the so-called dumb person doesn't pause. They act. They trust their gut, even if it's ill-informed. And they project certainty, something the crowd craves. Why? Because most people are afraid. They don't want nuance. They want someone who seems to know what they're doing, someone to follow, someone who seems immovable, unbothered, unshaken. And the tragic irony is those who are most confident are often the least qualified to lead. Machiavelli understood this paradox. He wrote, "It is not necessary for a prince to have all the virtuous qualities, but it is necessary to appear to have them." In other words, performance overrides substance. This is where the so-called dumb people excel. They may not deeply understand the system they're navigating, but they've learned to mimic the signals of success, confidence, decisiveness, simplicity. And in the eyes of the masses, that's enough. The masses don't have time or interest to evaluate every leader deeply. They look for cues. Who seems strong? Who seems stable? Who speaks without flinching? And they follow that. Even if, underneath the surface, it's all hollow. But here's where things get even more unsettling. Intelligence often breeds self-awareness, and self-awareness often breeds insecurity. The more you know, the more you realize how much you don't know. That humility, while noble, becomes a liability in systems that reward bravado over wisdom. The dumbest people win because they have no internal resistance. They don't second-guess. They don't hesitate. They don't overthink. They move. And in a world that prizes movement over reflection, they rise. So ask yourself, have you ever held back a good idea because you weren't sure it was perfect? Have you ever deferred to someone louder, even though you knew they were wrong? Have you ever doubted yourself into silence while someone with half your insight dominated the room? That's what Machiavelli warned us about. The world doesn't reward virtue on its own. It rewards visible strength, perceived clarity, projected certainty. This isn't a call to become reckless or abandon intelligence. It's a wake-up call. If we want to succeed in a world that often confuses noise for wisdom, we have to understand the game. We have to stop assuming that merit alone is enough. It's not. You need strategy. You need presence. You need to understand how power actually moves through people and systems. Because until you do, you'll keep watching the wrong people win and wondering why. And that leads us to something even deeper. If winning is often about appearance, then how do you weaponize perception without becoming fake? How do you use Machiavellian insight without becoming a manipulator? The confidence illusion. Why power belongs to the bold, not the right. If Machiavelli was right, and increasingly, it seems like he was then, we're living in a world that doesn't reward those who are right, but those who are confident. And that's a terrifying realization for anyone who spent their life trying to do things the correct way. We're taught to believe that truth, intelligence, and moral clarity are the foundations of power. But in many cases they're not. They're the weights that slow down the thinker while the bold leap ahead. And this isn't just happening in politics or boardrooms. It's happening in classrooms, on social media, in relationships, and in every conversation where perception outweighs reality. The people who win aren't the ones who have the best ideas. They're the ones who act as if their ideas are undeniable. Confidence is a performance, and Machiavelli understood that. In The Prince, he doesn't tell rulers to be good, he tells them to appear good. Why? Because people don't follow what's good. They follow what feels stable, what feels strong. And strength, to the average observer, is indistinguishable from confidence. That means, if you can perfect the performance of certainty, you can bypass the need for truth altogether. That's the confidence illusion. And once you see it, you start noticing it everywhere. I think about it. How many times have you watched someone completely unqualified take control of a situation, not because they had the best knowledge, but because they didn't hesitate? That lack of hesitation is interpreted as leadership, as competence, even as intelligence. Meanwhile, the smartest person in the room is still running simulations in their mind, still weighing options, still trying to perfect the answer. But the moment passes. The crowd moves on, and the bold one wins. This is why, paradoxically, intelligence can be a disadvantage in systems that reward speed over depth. The more aware you are of complexity, the more you tap the brakes. You become cautious. You speak in probabilities, not absolutes. You say things like "it depends" or "we should consider." But those phrases don't inspire crowds. They don't rally votes or win deals. What wins is "I know exactly what to do," even when that person has no idea what they're talking about. The confidence illusion works because on a primal level, humans crave certainty. We're wired to follow those who seem to know what's going on even if they don't, especially when they don't. Because in moments of uncertainty, perception becomes reality. And that means the person who projects the most certainty becomes the one we trust. Not because they've earned it, but because they've claimed it. Machiavelli didn't see this as a flaw in human nature. He saw it as the default. And he told us, if you want power, stop trying to be right all the time. Start learning how to be compelling. Learn how to carry yourself. Learn how to speak with conviction, even when you're still figuring it out. Learn how to make people believe not just in your ideas, but in you. That's the real battlefield. That's the invisible game most people don't even know they're playing. So what do we do with this knowledge? Do we abandon truth? Do we become performers, manipulators, illusionists? No, that's not the point. The point is to stop assuming that truth will carry itself. It won't. You can be right and still lose. You can be brilliant and still be ignored. What you need is presence. You need to learn how to let your ideas land with the same force as those who are faking theirs. You need to develop the ability to speak clearly, confidently, and without apology, not because you're pretending, but because your truth deserves to be heard. Ask yourself, how often do you water down your ideas to make them more palatable? How often do you question yourself into silence while someone else dominates with empty certainty? That's the cost of underestimating the power of confidence. And that's the challenge Machiavelli throws at us: not to abandon depth, but to pair it with strength, to stop fearing the performance and start mastering it. This leads us to the next uncomfortable truth. If confidence and appearance are everything, then authenticity becomes a strategic choice, not a default virtue. So how do you remain authentic in a world that rewards illusion? Strategic authenticity. How to be real without being ruled. If confidence is king but authenticity is what we're told to value, then where does that leave us? It leaves us in a strange paradox, one that Machiavelli saw long before the Instagram age. We're told to be ourselves, to speak our truth, to stay real. But the moment we do, we're judged, misread, or ignored. We're vulnerable, not powerful. The world loves the idea of authenticity, but it often rewards performance. And that's where strategic authenticity enters the conversation. It's not about faking who you are. It's about choosing which parts of yourself to reveal, when, and why. It's about understanding that truth and power don't always live in the same room. And if you want to influence the world without being crushed by it, you need to learn how to navigate both. Machiavelli's most misunderstood advice was never lie all the time. It was don't be naive. Don't walk into the arena thinking your raw honesty will protect you. It won't. People don't always want the truth, they want what feels good. They want what confirms their worldview. They want what gives them certainty. And if your authenticity disrupts that too sharply, they'll reject it. They'll reject you. So the real game is this: how do you stay anchored in your truth without letting your truth become your cage? This is where strategic authenticity becomes powerful. It means you don't have to expose every thought you have. You don't have to be radically transparent with people who've shown they'll weaponize your vulnerability. You don't need to constantly explain yourself to those who aren't listening. Being authentic doesn't mean being defenseless. It means being intentional. And intention is what separates those who get heard from those who get silenced. I think of it this way: in a world that favors boldness, your truth needs armor. Your ideas need structure. Your voice needs rhythm. The most powerful communicators in history weren't just authentic, they were deliberate. They knew when to speak and when to hold back. They knew how to shape their truth so it could be received. That's not manipulation. That's wisdom. That's the ability to move through the world without being consumed by it. Now ask yourself, how often have you betrayed your own voice just to be accepted? How often have you overshared, hoping someone would see the real you only to be met with confusion or rejection? That's what happens when authenticity becomes blind, when it becomes a reflex instead of a strategy. You open yourself up with no awareness of the terrain. And in a Machiavellian world, that's a dangerous move. Strategic authenticity means knowing what version of you the moment requires and delivering that without losing your core. It's not about lying. It's about layering. You can be fully real without being fully exposed. You can speak your truth without handing people the sharpest pieces of it. That's not cowardice. That's control. That's power. And in a world where the loudest often win, being strategically authentic allows you to be both true and effective, which, let's be honest, is the rarest combination. Machiavelli would say, don't confuse authenticity with obligation. You don't owe your full self to everyone. You owe your full self to yourself. And when you master that, when you learn how to control what you reveal, without erasing who you become dangerous in the best way. You become someone who can't be easily manipulated, misunderstood, or dismissed. You become someone who can move through multiple worlds while staying rooted in your own. And here's the twist: the people who seem the most real are often the most rehearsed. The most impactful speeches, stories, and messages are crafted with care. They feel spontaneous, but they're structured. They feel raw, but they're refined. That's not deception, that's design. And once you understand that, you stop waiting for the world to get you. You start shaping the space around you so they can. So here's the question to sit with: what does your authenticity look like when it's not reactive, but intentional? When it's not desperate to be seen, but deliberate in its impact? That's the shift. That's how you stop being ruled by a world that misunderstands you and start becoming the one who shapes it from within. Which leads us to the final and most uncomfortable revelation: if dumb people win because they're fearless, and bold people win because they're confident, and strategic people win because they master perception, then what happens when you begin to play the game with your eyes open? Play the game, change the game, how awareness becomes your superpower. At this point, the veil should be lifting. You've seen how the world often rewards the bold over the brilliant, the loud over the wise, the simple over the nuanced. You've seen how confidence can override competence, how perception can eclipse truth, and how the dumbest people, those unburdened by doubt, often win because they don't waste time second-guessing themselves. But now comes the real turning point. What do you do with this knowledge? Do you reject the game altogether, retreat into cynicism, and convince yourself that integrity has no place in a world built on illusion? Or do you learn to play consciously and, in doing so, begin to change the game from within? This is where awareness becomes your superpower. Not passive awareness, the kind that sees injustice and does nothing, but active, strategic awareness. The kind that understands how the system works and uses that understanding to move through it intentionally. You don't have to become fake. You don't have to become manipulative. But you do have to stop being naive, because the world doesn't rearrange itself for your ideals. It rewards those who navigate it skillfully. And skill, in this context, means knowing how to walk the line between authenticity and influence, between truth and timing, between silence and speech. Machiavelli never said to abandon morality. He said to understand that morality alone won't guarantee results. He said that if you want to lead, influence, or survive in structures built by humans, you need to understand human nature not as it should be, but as it is. And human nature is messy. It's reactive. It's emotional. It's drawn to signals more than substance. That's not a flaw. That's a fact. And once you accept that, your power begins. You begin to realize that you don't have to be the loudest to be heard, you just have to speak when the moment is right. You don't have to be the smartest, you just have to stop hiding your knowledge behind hesitation. You don't have to be perfect, you just have to be present. This is what awareness teaches you: how to recognize the patterns, the triggers, the games people play, and then how to position yourself so you're not playing defensively, but creatively. Because here's the deeper truth: once you see how the game is played, you stop being trapped by it. You can start making moves that others don't even see. You can play multiple roles without losing who you are. You can let the loud people talk, let the overconfident people posture, and then step in with precision when the tide turns. You don't need to dominate every conversation. You only need to know which conversation matters. That's not manipulation. That's mastery. And here's what nobody tells you: when you play the game consciously, you actually create more space for truth. You create space for nuance in a world that's addicted to absolutes. You create space for real leadership in a culture obsessed with appearances. You create space for quieter voices to be heard, not by yelling louder, but by shifting the room with your presence. That's what real influence looks like. Not force, not noise, but awareness applied with intent. So ask yourself, what room are you in right now where you're playing small because you think the loud ones have all the power? What part of you have you muted because you believe truth doesn't stand a chance against charisma? It's time to let go of that story. It's time to stop pretending that the game is rigged against you and start realizing that the moment you understand the rules, you can bend them. You can use them. You can rise within them, not by becoming someone else, but by becoming the version of yourself that sees clearly and acts decisively. That's what Machiavelli was really teaching us. Not how to deceive, but how to see. How to look at the chaos of human behavior and find the patterns. How to step into systems that confuse most people and navigate them with clarity. That kind of awareness is rare, it's powerful, and it's yours now. So the next time you see someone winning who shouldn't, don't get bitter. Get curious. Ask yourself, what are they doing that I'm not willing to do? What fear are they free from that still holds me back? And more importantly, what would happen if I stopped waiting for the world to reward what's inside me and started learning how to reveal it strategically? Play the game. Change the game. That's how the dumbest people win. But it's also how the most aware people rise. And if you've made it this far, you're no longer in the dark. You've seen behind the curtain. And now, it's your move.